Loudmouth, George and the Fishing Trip by Nancy Carlson. George was always bragging. According to him, he ran the fastest and he ate the biggest pizzas. And he read the thickest books. So when Harriet told him she was going fishing on Saturday, of course George bragged that he caught the biggest fish. "If you're such a good fisherman," said Harriet, "why didn't you come with us?" "I'd better not," said George. "I'd probably catch such a big fish it would sink the boat." Harriet didn't believe him for a minute. When she got home, she asked her dad if George could come with them on Saturday. "Sure," said Dad. "I'll give his parents a call." "Guess what, George?" said George's mother. "Harriet's father just called and invited you to go fishing tomorrow. Won't that be fun?" "Oh, no," thought George. "Why did I brag so much? The biggest fish I ever caught was in the pet shop." Early the next morning, they were off to the river. "George, I brought an extra fishing rod if you need it," said Harriet's mother. "As a matter of fact, I do. You see, the last time I went fishing, I hooked this enormous fish. It was so big, it broke my fishing rod," George bragged. At last, they were out on the water. "Here's a worm for your hook, George," said Harriet. "I thought you'd fished before," said Harriet. "Well, I have," George fibbed, "but we didn't use worms, we used other stuff." So Harriet baited George's hook. Then they sat, and they sat. And they sat. They sat for 3 hours, and no one got even a nibble. "I think we'll call it a day," said Harriet's father. "The fish just aren't biting today." "Thank heaven," thought George as he started to reel in his line. Suddenly his bobber went down. "You've got a fish, George!" yelled Harriet. "Oh, wow!" said George. "Help! What do I do?" "I thought you were a great fisherman," said Harriet. I guess I exaggerated a little bit," George confessed. "Help me!" "Keep reeling it in, George," Harriet told him. "It's the biggest fish ever," yelled George. "You almost have it, George," said Harriet. "Just keep reeling." "It's so big it will bite my hand off," yelled George. "Here it comes," said Harriet. "Oops," said George. "Better throw it back, George," said Harriet. "It's too little to keep." "Well, it felt big," said George. Monday after school, George told Ralph all about the fishing trip. "I caught a fish. It was this big," he said. "How big, George?" said Harriet. "Well, this big," said George. "How big?" "Well, maybe it was only this big," said George. "But it sure put up a big fight." I hope you enjoyed this book. And don't forget, be good for Mommy and Daddy. Bye-bye.